Level 1. The boy, Sveinn. You are 12 years old and you belong to the longship now, not as a warrior, not yet. As a boy who does what boys do on ships, everything nobody else wants to do, done immediately, done without complaint, done again tomorrow. You bail water. The ship breathes the sea in through its clinker-built hull, a constant slow intake that would sink it if nobody bailed. You bail for hours. Your arms shake. You bail more. This is your first lesson about the sea. It is always trying to take the ship back, and the only thing between the ship and the bottom is the continuous effort of everyone aboard. You cook when the cook needs an extra pair of hands. You mend rope. You hold lines during maneuvers that stronger men need both hands free for. You run messages between the Jarl at the stern and the men at the oars. You are the ship's youngest voice, the ship's smallest legs. The men do not coddle you. That's not cruelty, it's preparation. A boy who is coddled at 12 is a liability at 16. They ignore you when you perform adequately and correct you loudly when you don't. The corrections are sometimes physical. You learn not to make the same mistake twice. Your father is aboard. He watches you but doesn't intervene. You understand this is a gift, the chance to earn your place without his name carrying you. You intend to earn it. The first time the ship reaches open ocean, past the fjord, past the islands, into the grey rolling expanse of the North Sea, you grip the rail and look at the horizon and feel something shift inside you that will never shift back. You are terrified. You are exactly where you are supposed to be. Level 2. The Oarsman, Roðrmaðr. You are 15 and your hands are permanent calluses. The oar is your world. When the wind fails, and it fails often, and at the worst moments, the oar is what moves the ship. You sit at your bench with 30 other men, and you pull. You pull in rhythm. You pull until the rhythm stops being a thing you think about and becomes a thing your body does without you. The Jarl's skald marks the stroke with a drum. You don't count pulls anymore. You just pull. Your back understands the rhythm in its muscle now. Your shoulders know when a stronger pull is needed without your mind telling them. You have crossed to England twice. You have seen the white cliffs. You have seen the rivers that lead inland past the green fields. You have seen the monasteries on the hilltops, stone buildings full of gold and silver, and men who have never learned to fight. The first raid is a thing you will carry differently at different ages. At 15, it feels like the stories. The speed of it, the chaos, the fire, the weight of what you take in your hands, and the lightness of carrying it back to the ship. At 30, you will remember other things about it. At 50, you will not talk about it at all. But you are 15, and you pull the oar, and the ship moves and the horizon opens, and you feel like the world was made for men like you. It was for a time. Level 3. The warrior, Víkingr. You are 18 and you carry your own axe. Your father gave it to you on the morning of your first real raid. Not a monastery, not an undefended village, but a fortified trading post with walls and armed men, and the specific dangerous unpredictability of people who intend to defend what's theirs. The axe is old. Your grandfather carried it. The handle has been replaced twice, but the head is original. Iron that has been with your family longer than you have been alive. Come home with it, or don't come home, your father said. You understood. Battle is nothing like the stories. The stories have a shape. Beginning, escalation, victory, glory. Battle has no shape. Battle is noise and mud and the terrifying compression of everything into a single moment where your training either holds or it doesn't. Your training holds. You don't freeze. You don't run. You do what the months of practice made your body do. You move, you cover, you strike when the opening comes, you don't stop moving. Afterward, you sit on the ground and your hands won't stop shaking for an hour. You don't tell anyone. You look at the older men and you can see they're not shaking and you wonder when that stops, when the hands stop shaking. You learn eventually that the hands stop shaking when something quieter stops moving inside you. You're not sure that's a good thing, but you go back. Next raid, next season, next year. You go back because you're good at it and because the alternative is the farm and the farm feels like surrender and you are 18 years old and surrender is not something you can conceive of yet. Level 4. The Huscarl, Hirðmaðr. You are 23 and you serve a Jarl directly. Huscarl, household warrior. You live in the Jarl's hall. You eat his food. You guard his life. You fight in his name. In exchange, you receive silver, status, and the specific security of belonging to something with walls and a fire, and men who will stand beside you. The Jarl is a man named Gunnar. He is 52 years old, thick as an oak, with a grey beard he's had since before you were born. He has fought in more raids than you've eaten meals. He has the specific authority of a man who has never had to explain himself because everyone around him already understands. You earn his trust slowly. You don't try to earn it. That would be transparent. You just do your job completely and without complaint, and his trust arrives the way all real trust arrives, quietly, without announcement, as the natural result of demonstrated reliability. Your job is his safety. You sleep near his door. You taste his food when there's reason for suspicion. You stand behind him in meetings where alliances are being made and enemies are being assessed. You learn to read rooms the way you learn to read the sea, for what's about to happen, not what's happening now. You also fight in his wars. He has enemies. Every Jarl has enemies. Territory disputes, blood feuds, old insults that calcified into permanent hostility before you were born. You fight those fights not because they're yours, but because you are his, and his fights are therefore yours. You kill a man in single combat for the first time. He was not a bad man. He was a Huscarl serving a different Jarl with a different claim to a different piece of land. You don't celebrate it. You note it, the way you note a storm, something real that happened that has to be incorporated into your understanding of what the world is. Level 5. The Shipmaster, Stýrimaðr. You are 28, and the ship is yours to command. Not to own, that distinction matters. The Jarl owns the ship, but you are the Stýrimaðr, the man who knows where the ship is in the world and how to move it from one place to another without killing everyone aboard. Navigation is not magic. It's knowledge, accumulated, practiced, corrected through error and near disaster. You know the stars that don't move. You know the currents that run along each coast. You know the colour of the water that tells you land is close, and the colour that tells you you're in open ocean with nothing beneath you for fathoms. You've sailed to Iceland now, you've touched the coast of Greenland. You've heard stories of land further west that other men have seen. Green shores beyond the ice, a place with no name in any tongue you speak. You believe the stories. You want to find that place. The sea is the only library you've ever needed. Every voyage writes something in you that can't be unwritten. You know things that landsmen don't know and can't know. The specific loneliness of open ocean, the specific belonging of a crew that has survived a storm together, the specific silence that falls on a ship when the wind dies and there is nothing in any direction but water and sky. You have a wife now. You married her between voyages. She is from a farming family. She has practical hands and an honest face, and she knew exactly what she was marrying when she married you. "Come back," she said when you sailed. "I always do," you said. So far, you have been right. Level 6. The Raider Captain. Höfðingi. You are 33 and you lead your own raids. The Jarl gives you a ship and a crew and a target. You plan the route. You choose the approach. You decide when to strike and how and when to withdraw. The men who follow you are experienced fighters who have chosen to follow you specifically. Not the Jarl's assignment, not circumstance. You. That choice is the weight you carry. When things go well, you brought them home with silver. When things go wrong, you brought them home in pieces, or you didn't bring them home at all. You've had both. The raid that went wrong was in Francia, better defended than the intelligence suggested. More men behind those walls than you'd planned for. You lost 4 men getting out. 4 men who trusted you with their lives and whose lives you miscalculated. You brought their bodies home when you could. When you couldn't, you brought what you could carry of them. A weapon, a piece of clothing, and you stood in front of their families and you said the true things, and you didn't soften them. The families didn't blame you. That almost made it worse, because you blamed yourself, and the absence of their blame didn't remove your blame. It just left it sitting there with nowhere to go. You raid every summer. You winter at home. The rhythm of the Viking life, violence in the warm months, hearth and family in the cold, begins to feel less like 2 different lives and more like 2 sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. You've stopped trying to separate them. Your son is 5 years old. He watches your face when you come home the way you once watched your father's face, looking for the man who left in the man who returned. You hope what he sees doesn't frighten him. Level 7. The Jarl. Jarl. You are 39 and men call you Jarl. It happened through death. The old Jarl, Gunnar, died in a fight he shouldn't have been in at 64. Stubborn to the end. His son was not ready. The men looked to you because you had been Gunnar's right hand for 11 years, and because readiness is what you had and what the son lacked. The son accepted it. He was wise enough for that, at least. You hold territory now. Farms and villages and a stretch of coastline that generates the ships and the men that generate everything else. You hold it through a combination of actual force, the credible threat of force, alliances with neighbouring Jarls, and the social fabric of obligations and favours and marriages that Viking political life is actually made of beneath the fighting. The fighting is the visible part. The politics is what keeps you alive between fights. You hold a thing. The assemblies where free men bring their disputes and you adjudicate them. You are fair because unfairness creates enemies, and enemies are expensive. You are decisive because indecision creates a vacuum, and vacuums fill with ambition. You have ambitions yourself, but you've learned that ambition expressed too openly is ambition that gets you killed. You hold your ambitions the way you hold a weapon in hostile territory. Present, but not visible. Ready, but not drawn. Your daughter is being married to the son of a Jarl 3 days' sail north. You arranged it. She is 17 and she is not unhappy with the arrangement. She understands the politics. She was raised in them, but she is not given the choice. That sits in you. You were a boy once who chose everything. You chose the sea. You chose the axe. You chose the ship. You made all of it. Your daughter does not get to choose. You tell yourself this is the way of things. The way of things is a story powerful people tell to justify what the way of things costs everyone else. You know that. You tell it anyway. Level 8. The Warlord. Víkingakonungr. You are 45 and your name travels faster than your ships. You command a fleet now. 6 longships. 240 men, the organizational complexity of a small army that you have to feed and pay and keep pointed in the same direction. Other raiders have sworn to you. They bring their ships under your flag for major campaigns in exchange for a share of what you take and the protection of your name. Your name is protective now. That's how you know you've arrived at something. When your reputation does work, your presence can't. You've spent 2 winters in England, not raiding, ruling. A stretch of territory that the English kings couldn't hold, and that you took and are holding. You collect taxes. You maintain roads. You adjudicate disputes among people who speak a language you're still learning. You are, to your own considerable surprise, a governor. You didn't come here to govern, you came here to take. But taking turned out to require governing to keep what you took. And governing requires systems, and systems require men who understand them, and you've spent 3 years building something you didn't intend to build. It works mostly. You sleep badly. The size of what you're responsible for presses on you in the dark in a way that individual danger never did. Individual danger you could meet with your body. Organizational complexity meets you in your mind at 3 in the morning with no sword useful against it. Your wife came from Norway to join you in England. She manages the household with the same practical competence she's managed everything. She tells you what your Jarls won't, what's actually happening in the parts of your territory you can't see directly. She's your best intelligence source, and she knows it, and so do you. Your son sailed on his first raid last summer. He came back. You stood on the dock and watched him come down the gangplank, and you felt something you don't have a word for. Pride and terror in the same breath. The specific fear of a man who knows exactly what the sea can take because the sea has taken from him before he came back. Level 9. The King. Konungr. You are 52 and someone has to be king. The old king died without a clear heir. The Jarls gathered. There were 3 serious candidates. 2 of them had stronger bloodlines. You had more ships and more men and more respect from the warriors who would actually have to fight whoever the king was. The warriors spoke. The Jarls listened. You are king. The words sit strangely. You were a boy bailing water. You were a boy carrying an oar. The distance between that boy and this title is so large that looking back across it produces something like vertigo. You rule from a great hall that was built by the king before you and the king before him. You hold court. You receive ambassadors from people who want things from you. Trade agreements, military alliances, the peaceful resolution of border disputes that could become wars if you let them fester. You let very few things fester. Your policy is not aggression. Your policy is clarity. Everyone understands exactly where the lines are and exactly what happens when the lines are crossed. That clarity, maintained consistently over years, produces a kind of stability that aggression never could. You still lead raids in summer. Not because you need to, you have Jarls and Warlords who do that. Because the men need to see you on a ship. A king who stops going to sea is a king who starts looking like a different kind of person from the men who follow him. You can't afford to look like a different kind of person. Your wife died 3 years ago. Fever, quick. She was fine on a Tuesday and gone by Friday, and you were on the other side of the country and you didn't get there in time. You got there in time to bury her. You stood at the mound and you said the words and you held your face completely still because kings don't weep in public, and you had already learned that lesson about what kingship costs. You wept alone, later in the dark. You miss her practical hands. You miss her honest face. You miss the person who told you what was actually happening. Nobody tells you what's actually happening anymore. That is the loneliest thing about being king. Level 10. The legend Eftirmæli. You are 60 years old and the world is changing around you. Christianity is spreading. You've watched it move across the territories. South first, then east, then into the kingdoms you share borders with. The old gods are retreating. Not dramatically. There's no battle for it. They just become less present in the public conversation, then less present in the private one, until one day you realize that the men around you are praying to a different thing, and the world they describe to their children is a different world. You haven't converted. You don't intend to. But you're not a fool. You know what you're watching. You know that the world your grandson will rule will not look like the world you raided at 18. The longships will still sail. The sea will still be the sea. But the men on the ships will think different thoughts about what they're doing and why. The raids are already changing. The monasteries that were once defenseless have walls now. The English have learned. The Franks have learned. Everybody who got raided for 50 years eventually learned. You taught them. That's the price of success. You educate your enemies. Your son rules beside you now. He's 31. He's a better politician than you were at his age and a slightly worse fighter, which is exactly the right ratio for the world as it currently exists. You are proud of him in the way of men who don't say proud. Your grandson is 9 years old. He has your eyes. He stands on the dock and watches the ships come in. You know that look. You wore it once. You don't know what the ships will mean to him, whether he'll sail them or rule the men who do, or worship a god that tells him the sea is just water and not the road to glory. You hope he finds his own horizon. You hope it cost him less than yours cost you. But you know that the things worth reaching for always cost something. You paid everything you had. You'd pay it again. Some nights you walk down to the ships in the dark. You put your hand on the curved wood of a prow. You feel the grain under your fingers. You smell the tar and the salt. You are 9 years old on a shore watching a dragon-headed ship slide out of the dusk. You are 12 years old, leaving without saying goodbye. You are 18 and your hands won't stop shaking. You are the boy and the oarsman and the warrior and the king. All of it at once. All of it still in you. The sea doesn't take everything. It just takes what it needs. Somewhere tonight, a boy is standing on a shore. He is 9 years old. A longship is sliding into the fjord. He is watching the men come down with gold in their ears and scars on their faces. He doesn't know what it costs. He doesn't know what the sea will make of him. He only knows that the dragon on the prow is the most magnificent thing he has ever seen. And the horizon is grey and vast and full of everything he doesn't have yet. He will sail. They always sail. The ships were waiting for him before he was born. They will be waiting for the next one after he is gone. The sea does not run out of boys who want to know what's beyond the grey horizon. It never has. It never will.